Aston Martin just broke the internet with a rear suspension layout that Formula One calls extreme. While GP fans reports rival team principals are joking, they're glad they didn't have to design it. It happened yesterday in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, where motorsport.com confirmed the covers finally came off the AMR26, and for the first time in years, the entire Formula One paddock actually gasped. We knew Adrian Newey had been working at Silverstone since early 2025, but nobody expected this. The 2026 regulations were supposed to restrict creativity and make the cars look the same. Instead, Newey has delivered a machine that looks like it landed from a different planet. This goes beyond a new coat of paint or a slightly tighter side pod, as it is the first car fully conceived under Newey's watch since Red Bull Racing announced his departure. It marks the beginning of the sport's new active aerodynamics era. While Ferrari showed us logical evolutions in January, and McLaren followed suit yesterday, Aston Martin has thrown the rulebook out the window. The car features geometry that shouldn't work, with suspension arms mounted in places that make zero mechanical sense, but absolute aerodynamic genius. The timing is critical because we are less than 48 hours away from the first wheels turning in Bahrain for preseason testing. Everyone is asking right now if this complex, fragile-looking beast can actually survive a race distance, not just whether it is fast. If Newey is right, the championship might already be over. But if he's wrong, Aston Martin just built the most expensive glass cannon in history. We start at the front, because the first thing you notice is the wide, flat nose. If you look underneath, there is a distinct bulge that veteran fans will recognize immediately. It is the return of the Pelican underbelly, a trick Newey used to dominate the grid with Red Bull back in the early 2010s. Most 2026 cars we have seen so far, like the Ferrari, have gone for slender, needle-like noses to minimize drag. But Aston Martin went the other way. The logic here involves creating a high-pressure zone under that nose bulge to accelerate air harder as it travels backward toward the floor. It effectively works like a pre-charge for the rest of the aerodynamics. While it might look ugly, fast is beautiful in Formula One, and this specific shape suggests they are finding downforce in areas where other teams aren't even looking. Moving your eyes back reveals even stranger details. The side pods look like tubes rather than traditional side pods. We saw a hint of this on the leaked Red Bull RB22 renders, but Aston has taken it to a new level. The inlets are tiny horizontal slits that are barely visible unless you're standing right next to the car. This design leaves a massive, unobstructed channel of air between the side pod wall and the floor edge. Newey has essentially isolated the cooling from the aerodynamics completely. The radiators must be mounted incredibly high and central to make this work, which usually kills your center of gravity, but clearly the trade-off is worth it. They are feeding clean, high-energy air directly to the rear diffuser without the dirty wake from the front tires interfering. It is a high-risk packaging nightmare for the mechanics, but a dream for the aero department. If you are finding this technical deep dive interesting, hit subscribe and the notification bell as we cover breaking F1 tech stories like this every week. Now we return to the car. This part has James Vowles at Williams scratching his head because the rear suspension layout is baffling. On a normal F1 car, the wishbones mount to the gearbox casing, but on the AMR26, the upper elements appear to mount directly to the rear wing support structure. This radical design moves the pickup points high enough to clear out the entire space above the diffuser, effectively creating a suspensionless tunnel for airflow. The mechanical load paths must be a nightmare to calculate, since you have suspension forces going through aerodynamic structures. This tells us that Newey is terrified of the new 2026 floor rules. He has compromised mechanical grip, tire wear, and serviceability, just to make sure that rear diffuser works harder than anyone else's. It is the kind of gamble only a man with 26 championships dares to take. This suspension layout links directly to the new 2026 active aero rules. These cars now switch between Z mode for corners and X mode for straights. When that rear wing flattens out in X mode, the center of pressure shifts massively, which would pitch a normal suspension and make the car unstable. With Newey's high mount geometry, the suspension forces might actually counteract that pitch. The car utilizes extreme anti-squat geometry to keep the platform stable and the floor sealed rather than squatting. If this works, the Aston Martin won't just be fast in the corners, it will be a rocket ship on the straights because it sits flatter and cleaner through the air than the competition. As we stare at the Aston, we can't ignore the rumor mill exploding around Mercedes. Vertex AI Search highlights Gary Anderson's analysis of a feature on the W17 that he calls the rat hole, which is an enlarged version of the mouse hole slot in the diffuser sidewall. Mercedes has opened this up significantly and added a small winglet near it. Aston Martin has a similar slot in the diffuser wall, but McLaren notably doesn't feature this at all. The theory suggests this rat hole energizes the diffuser edge and seals the floor better than any physical skirt could. If Mercedes has found a way to seal the floor, while Newey is busy trying to feed the floor, we are looking at two completely different philosophies clashing head-on. One relies on flow volume, while the other relies on flow sealing. And history tells us sealing usually wins. Regarding Mercedes, Motorsport Week reports that Juan Pablo Montoya dropped a bomb on a podcast earlier this week, claiming his sources say the silver arrows are hiding their performance harder than ever. He threw out a number of 3 to 4 seconds, believing the lap times we saw in the Barcelona shakedown were a joke compared to the W17's true potential. If Montoya is right, all this beautiful engineering on the Aston Martin might be for second place. A 4-second gap in Formula One is an eternity and larger than the entire field spread in qualifying. While Montoya loves a headline, the confident body language of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli suggests they aren't worried about Newey's Pelican nose. The final piece of this puzzle is the engine, because Aston Martin F1 officially announced that 2026 is the year they become the Honda Works team. This isn't a customer deal anymore, as the power unit in the back of that AMR26 was built specifically for this chassis. The tiny cooling inlets only exist because Honda agreed to package their cooling system in a weird, compact way to suit Newey's aero demands. This level of integration allowed Red Bull to dominate for so long, and now Aston has it. If the Honda engine delivers the promised 50-50 electrical split reliably, and that radical suspension holds together, this car eliminates every excuse the team has ever had. We are looking at a grid split down the middle for the 2026 season. Ferrari and McLaren have unveiled radical new concepts to tackle the 2026 regulations. But Aston Martin has taken it a step further by interpreting the regulations as a challenge to break physics. The implication for viewers is that the first few races could be chaotic because the AMR26 is complex, and complexity often breaks. We might see Newey's masterpiece lapping the field in Bahrain, or we might see it parked in the garage with a suspension failure on lap 10. There is no middle ground with a design this extreme, which is exactly what F1 needed. After years of convergence, where every car looked the same, 2026 has given us divergent thinking again. Whether you root for Alonso or Russell, the fact that we don't know who is fastest is excellent news. We will know the truth in just 24 hours when testing goes green in Bahrain. Until then, the AMR26 remains the most fascinating mystery on the grid. If you want the full breakdown of Day 1 testing the moment it happens, hit subscribe and stick around.